So you go back and you look at American history. I mean, our lifetime, American history, right? Recent past, the last 20, 30, 40, 50 years. And to some extent, you have to go back a little more than 10 or 20 years because Reaganomics has just so firmly changed the nature of America over the last 20 years that a lot of young people don't have any idea what America was like back in the 60s, at least for white people. But that world, that beaver cleaver world that had a high level of safety and a low level of crime, where, you know, cute little white kids could go out on their bicycles and be safe and go out and spend, you know, Louise and I, when we were growing up, both of us in different cities and different parts of Lansing, but, you know, largely white communities. We would leave in the morning during the summer and come home at night, and our parents never worried about us, didn't know where we were, right? We didn't have cell phones back then. Society was relatively functional. And why is that? Well, for the white middle class at that time, and I would argue probably for the black middle class, although I don't have the personal experience of having been part of that, so I can't speak for that. But for the white middle class at that time, there was a sense of safety. You had a job, you had a pension, you had Social Security waiting for you, you had white privilege, I guess, is a piece of it. But it goes way beyond that. It's really we had a society that was functional. And then along came, you know, the Ayn Rand libertarian Republicans saying, "Oh, well, wait a minute, you know, we can't be doing this. You know, the labor unions, they got too much." See, you had a union backing you up. You had a community in the workplace. You had, you know, neighborhoods that worked. And now, as that is being ripped apart, you're seeing, you know, in the white community, it's the whole Breaking Bad thing. In the African American community, it's you know, well, add over policing to that, and what a mess you've got. But where I'm going with this whole thing, and I started with addiction, and in fact, it's like the way that we deal with addiction is so wrong. And I would argue that the way we're dealing with the people in our society who have fallen through the cracks or who are not working out well, so, you know, however you want to say that, are pretty identical. This new book, Chasing the Scream by Johann Hari. He writes, ironically, the war on drugs actually increases all those larger drivers of addiction. You know, now, again, think of addiction as a metaphor for all kinds of dysfunctional behaviors. He says, for example, I went to a prison in Arizona, the 10th city, where inmates were detained in tiny stone isolation cages, they called it the hole, for weeks and weeks on end to punish them for using drugs. It is as close to a human recreation of the cages, the guaranteed deadly addiction in rats, as I can imagine. And when those prisoners get out, they will be unemployable because of their criminal record, guaranteeing that they will be cut off even more. He says, there is an alternative. You can build a system that is designed to help drug addicts to reconnect with the world. And I want to take this, and I absolutely agree with all of this. And I, looking back on my teenage years, I used a fair number of drugs. I've said that before. I'll tell you candidly. I don't think that it was ever horribly problematic for me. I knew a number of people who were using heroin. I had one friend who died from a heroin overdose. But I also know that a lot of those people just walked away from it. I mean, friends of mine who just they got a job and they got married and they just quit using drugs. It's like the drug use was either an experiment or it was a symptom of a disconnect that might have been associated with going off to school or whatever. But so the bottom line, the main point that I wanted to make is that the Democratic Socialist agenda is not only an anti-addiction agenda, it's also an anti-violence agenda. It's an anti-crime agenda. If people know that no matter what happens, no matter how badly the banksters behave, that when capitalism fails, the government will catch them. If they know that no matter where they live, they will have good schools for their kids. If people know that no matter, what job they have, they will earn enough money that they don't have to live in poverty, that they don't have to worry where their next meal is coming from. If people know that if they get sick, they have an absolute right to health care. If people know all those things, they're less inclined to engage in antisocial behavior, including, the use of drugs, turning recreational drugs into addictive drugs. But they're less likely to engage in antisocial behavior. And so I guess, my answer to the crazy white guy who called earlier saying, well, most of the people who kill cops are young black men. I don't know that that's true, but I know that it's the white supremacist meme that's all over Twitter. Well, you want to do something about that? Make people feel safe. I mean, it's really simple. Make people feel safe. This is not hereditary. The genes that make people black or white are just, it's just a single gene that has to do with melanin in the skin. It's got nothing to do with anything else. It doesn't have to do with intelligence or criminality or anything else. This is not nature. This is nurture. This is how our society works. So you want to stop the problem of drug addiction right now? The president's new thing, and the Republicans have even discovered this, is let's do something about the opiate crisis. The opiate crisis in this country is a symptom of a society that's melting down as a result of 40 years of Reaganomics. Let's do something about crime in the inner city. Well, fine. Rebuild the inner cities.
To watch more clips from our programs, hit the Watch More Videos button over here. And please be sure to hit the handy-dandy subscribe button so you'll always be up to date. Tag, you're it.